Well, the Inspired Destiny program was designed for teens to 20s, so mid-teens to 20s, really. I think we had 13 to 22 age group, roughly. And it was principles and methodologies, tools that I found that assisted people in maximizing their mental capacities and their physical capacities to great heights. And so what I did is I shared these principles and gave them practical actions and exercises and things they can do with groups that would allow them to wake up that genius that they have inside. And help them with tools that they could do to empower them in each of the areas of their life, not just academic, but in social skills and relationship with their families, even knowing how to manage money, because any area of your life you don't empower, people will overpower you. So my objective was to help them at a young age learn how to empower all areas of their life, how to be inspired, how to wake up their genius, how to select and guide themselves in their career, and how to build wealth, and how to have loving relationships, and how to lead and wake up your natural born physically, so you can have the vital body and the energy and looks that you want. So Inspired Destiny is a really powerful program for the youth, and I love doing it. I don't get to do it, every week, but I love doing it, and it's so inspiring because one day we were there, and we had a lot of people that were labeled, sent there by their parents. There were people that were in the spectrum, and also defiant disorders and attention deficit disorders and all kind of labels that they were put on these kids. And we started at 8 in the morning, and we went to 7 o'clock at night. And we only had one break in the morning, one at lunch, and one in the afternoon. And those children stayed engaged, focused, inspired, present, participating the entire day. And it was 7 o'clock when the parents are coming to pick up the kids. They came in the back of the room and saw their kids doing a highly engaging activities, reading their mission statements, looking at what they're planning on doing in their careers, talking about how they love their parents. I mean, it was just an amazing day at the end. And the parents were astonished, and none of the kids wanted to leave. They didn't want to go home. And they all gathered at the end. And the parents were wanting to go home and, have dinner and stuff like that, but they were seeing their kids engaged. And they go, "Is that my kid?" And they were, "Is this my child?" They were having a hard time comprehending it. And I explained to them that every child has a dream. They have something they want to create. They have things they want to learn. And sometimes they don't see how the structure that they're in is helping them do that. And they become defeated and disengaged. And then they get labeled, and they go into their amygdala, and they do immediate gratifying behaviors instead of long-term visionary activities that they could be doing. And we can develop the forebrain at a young age. The typical training that's been taught is that it takes around 23 to 27, 25, 26, 27, when the frontal cortex starts to become myelinated and developed. But I've seen kids at age 12 and 13 and 14 start developing that area of the brain by finding out what they love doing and pursuing it. I know a 13-year-old girl that lectured with me in Las Vegas that literally got a standing ovation because she knew what she wanted to dedicate her life to and was on track at 13. I had a guy that was wanting to study neuropathology and being a brain surgeon at 13 and was already reading all the textbooks on it. When people do that, they already develop that forebrain, and they transcend the labels. And the brain is neuroplastic, and it has the capacity to remold itself. And if you use it, if you don't use it, you lose it. But if you use it, you can develop it. And I think excelling and allowing a child to go and do what they really love to do and be inspired by it is amazingly, prolifically impacting the brain development. So instead of the label, the love. Instead of the here's how you're supposed to be and fit in, find that genius and uniqueness, and let's see how we can excel it, and to give them the experience of what they can contribute. Everybody has a capacity to contribute. I hope I can share something. I was speaking at a Goodwill Industries office meeting one time. And what they do is they take people that are challenged on the street, sometimes homeless, sometimes with health issues, psychological issues, and everything else, supposedly. And they sit down and they ask them questions and find out where their gift is, where they excel. And then job opportunities where they excel. And I watched the most amazing people emerge because they were given the opportunity to excel. And there was no labels. There was just, where's your gift? Let's find it. Let's excel at it. And people were so inspired, and they had such self-worth emerging. And then it didn't even matter what people said, because they had confidence in themselves. We can't let the world on the outside dictate how we feel on the inside. Just because everybody's going to project their values onto you. No matter who you are, they're going to project their values onto you. And you're not their values, you're your values. And you have to be able to say, thank you for your opinion, I appreciate that. But my opinion on the inside is more profound than all opinions on the outside. Yes. I was in Brisbane, Australia, and I was speaking there. And this lovely lady who is an accountant, single mother with a 16-year-old son, came up to me. And she said, Dr. Demartini, I have a teenager that's driving me crazy. All he wants to do is sit in front of a computer all day long, and I can't get him to go get a job. And he's 16, he needs to help me at the house and get a job. Can you come and consult with him and talk some sense into this young man? And I said, well, usually the person that has the complaint is the one I usually like to talk to first. Do you mind if I chat with you for a while? And then I said, okay, let me now chat with him. So I went to his room. I actually went to their house and went into his room with him. And I said, your mom's on your case, huh? And he goes, oh yeah. I said, what are you working on? He says, well, I'm developing with some code, some software for a game I'm making. I said, you know how to code and make software and develop things? He goes, oh yeah. I said, do you mind if I learn from you? Can I sit with you and watch you do it? He said, sure. And he sat there and was developing code for a game and showing me how the video was changing. I was changing the code, and he was ingenious, unbelievable. His mother had no idea what his skill was, no idea. She just saw him in front of that darn computer. And she was not computer literate that much at the time. She wasn't, she came from a different age, So I spent a whole hour with this young man. And when I came out, she said, well, did you talk some sense into him? I had my arm around him and I said, no, I hired him. I hired him. She goes, what? I said, I hired him. Your son is quite ingenious with software, and he could actually help me develop something I need in my business. And I'd be willing to pay him to do this software development. And she was, my son, he can develop something that's valuable to you. He said, I'm telling you, he knows how to develop code. He can actually develop a little kind of app thing for me. And she goes, I had no idea. Well, that was many years ago. That was quite a number of years back. And about 4 years ago, I was speaking in Brisbane again, and they were in the front row. And right in the front row, and I was speaking, I got up on stage and I looked down at him. I literally walked off the stage, down these steps right there, and gave them both hugs and got a tear in my eye. And she put her arms around her son. And I said, I nodded to her, and she says, my son, the genius, he develops all kinds of codes and everything else, works at IBM and makes nearly 200,000 a year.
Wow.
I said, the very thing you thought was a problem was the gift. He found his gift at a young age. He knew what he wanted to do. You thought he needed a job at McDonald's or something.
Exactly. You've hit it on the head. I think that's exactly. Parents have got this misconception, if their child doesn't fit into the society's norms of education to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, etc., they cannot see that. They feel like their child is not going to fit in. There's going to be a problem. What you've just said, I think, is golden for our parents. And I know that there's going to be a lot. that are going to say thank you for
Can I
that.
share another one? I want
Please,
to share another one.
please.
I was also in Brisbane. Australia, at a different time. And I was doing a program on attention deficit disorder, an evening program on it for 2 hours on things you can do. And that's the label that's put on kids, right? But yet that kid can sit in front of a videogram for 9 hours straight without a break and be totally focused. So he doesn't have attention deficit disorder in the things that are valuable to him, just at the stuff that's disengaging. So he had this kid, and he had his young son with him. His son was 14, going on 15. And he pulls out 2 pieces of paper, 2 schools that rejected their son and said he can't stay at this school. Two rejected schools rejecting the son at their school because of disengagement, not applying himself, not doing it. We can't have this son here. He rejected. He says, what do I do with my son? I smiled and I said, I looked to the young man and I said, what do you spontaneously do every day that you love doing? You can't wait to get up in the morning and do every day. And he says, cars. I said, what do you mean cars? He says, well, I make model cars. I read about cars. I go and I walk around the streets and look at different. My love is cars. I said, tell me more about it. I said, do you fill your space with cars? And then the father said, that's all he's got in his room. His room has got posters of cars. He's got models of cars. He's got books and magazines on cars. Everything's cars. Okay. And do you spend most of your day working and thinking and focusing on cars? He goes, yeah. And that's what the father says. That's all. I can't get him to stop. I can't get him to school. All he's doing is focusing on cars. Is that what energized you? Absolutely. The kid is energized by it. And whenever you get money, do you buy something to do with cars? He goes, yep. And is that where you have a lot of orders, everything organized? You know exactly where everything is in the room relating to these cars? Yep. And are you disciplined? Are you reliable to get your cars done and to read and to watch movies on cars and stuff? He goes, yep. And do you think about it and visualize it and talk to yourself about cars and talk to others about cars? Father says that's all he talks about. I said, are you inspired by cars and the designer of cars? And he said, he started rattling off stuff about cars that was way over my head. I said, and is your goal to be involved in cars? And he said, my goal is to own a car dealership. My is in the very fastest cars that have ever been created by the greatest designers in cars. That's my dream. He knew what he wanted to do at 14. I said, is that what you study? You spend your day studying that? He says, yes. I told the father, I said, find the biggest and the best car dealership for the fanciest and fastest cars in the city and see about getting him a job there. If he has to start sweeping, if he has to go and clean, he has to do anything, get him a job at that and give authorization at a young age to go do that. He says, you expect me to do it, so don't worry about school. I said, the hell with the school right now. Get him in a car dealership. I'll be willing to bet he'll be the fastest salesperson in cars. And this kid is going, yes, somebody understands me. He hugs me. He said, that's all I want to do, please. Well, the father listened. And I told the father, I said, I bet he'll be a multimillionaire before he's 20 years old. That's what happened.
That's incredible.
He found he already knew what his dream was. And it was being suppressed by the world around him. Because that you can't do that. Correct. That's not what you're supposed to do. You shouldn't do that. Find the gift. Concentrate. And then feed the gift by linking everything that you feel will help that child to that. And that the question in life is how specifically is the knowledge you want to share with your child helping them fulfill what's most meaningful to them? And get that out of the child so the child can see it. If you can ask the child, how is studying math going to help you do what you want? I had a boy who wanted to climb Mount Everest, but he was wanting to drop out of school. And I said, you want to climb Mount Everest? And the headmaster asked me to speak with him and told me the classes. And I asked him, what are the classes he's supposed to be taking? And he said, well, there's chemistry and there's some math and there's social studies and there's language and this and that. And I said, so you're going to climb Mount Everest? He says, yeah. He said, at what altitude is the partial pressure of oxygen and CO2? Do you know those ratios as you go up to different altitudes to know how your breathing is going to be? He goes, no. I said, you're going to go climb Mount Everest without knowing your degree of oxygen usage when you do it at high altitude? He goes, do I need to know that? I said, well, Sherpas are adapted, but if you don't do enough adaptation and you don't have enough oxygen, you're going to get a headache, you're going to vomit, you're going to end up with extreme pain in your head, you're going to have difficulty breathing, and you won't be able to walk, you won't be able to make it. You got to know what your CO2 levels and CO2 levels. And he goes, oh. I said, do you have a class on chemistry by chance? He goes, well, yeah. I said, why don't you get your chemistry teacher to help you to go to Mount Everest by teaching you everything you need to know to get to Mount Everest, and learn the chemistry that you're going to need to do it, and let him help you get there, and have, instead of him, a teacher telling you what to do, have him on your team, and he's an employee getting you to Mount Everest. He goes, I never thought of it that way. That's cool. And I said, in the social studies, do you know the language of Nepal? And do you know the language of Tibet? He goes, no. Well, how are you going to communicate with your team of Sherpas? I said, why don't you get your language teacher to help you learn that language and help you on that. And anyway, I got him engaged in school. And all of a sudden, once he saw how the classes he was taking was helping him get his dream, he then decided to postpone his trip until he finished those classes. And he was going to go at 8 to 18 instead of 16. He was going to drop out of school. So if you can link whatever else you think could help the child and honor them by linking it to what they value, they'll engage and encompass it all. And that's why finding the what is most important and highest on the child's value first is the greatest starting point. And then feed that by linking things. You would never go and make a sale to a human being without caring enough about their values to articulate the product, service, and idea in terms of those values. And a child is a customer, and they're buying knowledge. And if you're a teacher, if you respect them, you're going to know their values and communicate in those values, and they're going to buy that knowledge and take it in and be willing to engage in that. So that's essential. And it doesn't matter where they are on the spectrum, they still want to learn, and finding out what that is allows them to expand that and allows them to excel. And when the more they cognitively get, the more they usually have articulations and skills of other capacities. So I think knowing what their values are, to me, is a starting point in any mastery and unfoldment of any child.